back there or here?
Just let me know.
You've got the traffic too.
So that's the,
Are you starting
that
now?
was what the deal was.
Al, we started already.
That 2 minutes ago. So anyway, that's what that is. So right now, we're dealing with, prepared for Thursday's meeting.
Yes.
And if I'm right, the agenda and the reports and everything are going to be into, for posting on the website shortly today.
Yes.
Okay, so for the end of the day, everything should be up. Okay. So Dan, this is yours, whatever you need to get from us that.
So I thought I'd just give you an update of some of the things that I've been working on. As you know, I've been hired as a contract administrator to help facilitate some of the transitional matters. And I'm happy to answer any questions from the public or from yourself. But in the packet today, you'll see a lot of information for Thursday night's special meeting. And some of those things include a revised timeline for the transition into a new department. And so that includes everything from job announcements to speaking with current employees about what the new department would look like, the number of employees, and the timelines for the fire academy, officer academy, and all those elements. So if we're going to transition and create the new fire department, we have to have that plan laid out, and it's a pretty full schedule. If you take a look at it, it starts almost immediately with job announcements and information pertaining to creating a new department, starting the interview process, hiring people, getting them in their background checks, medical backgrounds, all the standard procedures that you would do for a new department, and then putting them in, the new people into a fire academy, and that takes a number of weeks to get through, so it pushes us right up against the wire. There are a few spots in there that we can discuss either now or on Thursday if you so choose when you get the board packet. And if you take a look at it, it's a very tight timeline, but there is some flexibility, but we do, I think it's illustrative of needing to move, relatively quickly if we want this transition to take place effective July 1st to the new year. So it has that timeline. We've taken a look at pension reform and
Somebody has their hand.
yes, I'm sorry.
Do you have a copy of that packet?
That packet's being assembled today, so it'll be assembled.
I thought you
I
mentioned it was.
just finished announcing that I understood that it was being transmitted, will be posted on the website before the end of the day.
Has the committee seen it?
No.
But I'm happy to answer any questions if you have anything specific to it prior to.
So we'll do this, you finish and.
Okay. So we're also, we've reviewed and had discussions with regards to the state's decision to do pension reform effective January 1st and how that would impact the district. As you know, we're in the middle of providing a second tier away from the 3% 50 and into the 2% 50 model, or excuse me, 3% 55. And so we've got clarification from the state, and the attorneys will be prepared to provide a presentation on that so that we know where people will fit into the new organization depending on if they're new people after January, people returning to the district. So that's kind of a convoluted thing because there's so many things going on with state reform and our approach to providing second tier or lower cost PERS costs, and so we have clarity on that matter as well. We've taken a look at the budget, and we've created a 5-year projection. So I've taken a pretty deep look at some of the capital costs and some of the things that have been discussed with the board in recent months. And we decided to put together a 5-year projection to make sure that we know where the department will be not only in the next 12 months, but going out 5 years. And these projections are conservative because, as we know, property taxes have dropped in recent years, and we want to make sure that with the transition we have the appropriate budget numbers, going forward, and not just a very narrow window. So we'll have Susan will provide a good amount of detail on that. We've also taken a look at a number of different models to cost out that budget for the 5-year period. And some of the difficulty of that is, are we going to get, a larger number of brand new people at a lower cost and in the new retirement system? Or are we going to get a lot of people returning at the higher cost, at a higher cost employee? So we've projected those numbers with a fuller, more seasoned department, and then other projections with a fuller new department, in other words, newer people. So those cost models are not too terribly far apart, we found, with pension reform. We were delighted to see that they're not too far out of whack. In a lot of organizations, when you calculate your higher cost employees versus those that are coming in new, you see a pretty wide range with the larger department. Our costs are to the point right now where even if we get seasoned people, a high number of seasoned people versus a high number of brand new people, it's not that wide of a range. So we were pleased to see that. And I think it was illustrative of seeing that the pension reform costs are going down to the point where they're more affordable than they have been in the past. So that's the reason for that. And I think Susan, she'll provide a lot of detail on that. We can take a look at the numbers of people and how we calculated it. And I spent some time with Chief Cole in terms of some of the capital items, and there's quite a bit of detail in there to make sure that we're not missing something. So it includes not only the 5-year budget forecasting, but some of the initial transition costs. I understand at the last meeting, transition costs were discussed. So we took a look at what CAL FIRE owns, what Coastside Fire owns, and what those transition costs would be. For example, fire apparatus. Who owns a fire apparatus, CAL FIRE or Coastside? Obviously, Coastside Fire owns them, but those are the type of expenses. If you miss some of them, they can be very, very expensive. So we've gone through great detail to look at all of those items. Taking a look at a lot of, and again, I've had conversations with both Chief Ferrara and Chief Cole about some of the different elements that would impact the change. The IT structure, the payroll structure, all of those things that used to be done by Coastside prior to the CAL FIRE contract, will you effectively be able to turn on the switch so that they're capable of functioning once again, and they are. So there were no red flags in that area in terms of the transition. The big issue is the budget, the people, the timelines for getting them hired. Did not seem to find any red flags with things that were out of the ordinary or unexpected or an unusually high cost. It appears in general, it's sort of a general statement, that the transition can take place without a great deal of difficulty. The most difficult part would be identifying the people that we're going to bring back into the organization and the timelines for getting them trained and up and running. So far, no questions?
I have a question on that.
Yes,
So
sir.
I'm kind of waiting to let you finish your
Yeah.
presentation before I
Please.
ask some of these questions. But one of the concerns that I have is, and Chief Ferrer sent us a letter a while back, kind of outlining the concern of going through the possible scenario. There's X amount of employees that used to work here that now work for CAL FIRE and are eligible to come back. There are some employees that never transitioned, used to work here and never worked for CAL FIRE, so they left prior to going to CAL FIRE, but ended up coming back, working with CAL FIRE, and are they eligible and where do they kind of fit in the mix? And then there's, I think, a larger concern for him, which is there are people that were working for CAL FIRE already when we contracted with CAL FIRE, they were assigned to the district, or they now work here today around this point, and they would like to stay if we do start a new fire department, and how do they come into the mix? And the concern is not just for the returning people that used to work here, but there are apparently a large number that are concerned about wanting to stay, but at what point do they make their announcement or make their decision, and do they stay at CAL FIRE employees for that period of time until July 1, or is it something where we bring them over earlier on? That's an unknown. It's so my concern is having that talk with CAL FIRE. I mean, we know Chief Ferrer was going to retire in December. It's another big concern for me, I think, for us. He hasn't officially announced it in writing to us as a board, but has said at the last board meeting that he is retiring in December. And if he is retiring, who is his replacement? And also, do we have a choice of who that replacement is, one, but two, how do they feel about this whole process? Where do they, come into play? So there's some concern about that whole transition piece for me, I think for everybody. It's been expressed to me, Justin's mentioned it to me, as, the union rep for the existing employees, or for the employees here right now. It's a major source of concern. So figuring that out sooner than later, I think, will, be very important.
I think it's a good question, Mike, and one that I built into the timeline is, I believe it's in late October, it might even be the first week of November, but I think it's late October. We will be offering to sit down with the CAL FIRE employees or any existing employees so that we can get clarity on that matter, because quite honestly, it is kind of gray. One of the things that has happened that we've discussed already, is pension reform and how will people come back into, the first tier or the second tier, or will they fall under the new pension reform? Those people won't, because those are brand new people. So we can essentially say that they'll come back either in the old tier or the second tier that we're developing.
Because they are old, they're existing members in PERS.
That's right.
And that's this whole pension reform is
for new people only.
and that's new people to PERS.
Correct. So we spent.
We went, going up to Sacramento, it was confusing and a concern for us, because unless you're away from the PERS retirement system for more than 6 months, you're still in the system.
That's correct.
And that leaves you this, my understanding, I think most people's understanding that was that it leaves you the opportunity to start right back where you left off.
Yes.
Right? Versus, I think maybe the general public would just assume, oh, they're a new employee, it's a brand new department, and why wouldn't they be 2.7 to 57
Yes.
versus 3 to 55?
Yes.
So that would, or 2 to 50, yeah, that other tier. So it's a concern of, where they are. I mean, I know we looked at a bunch of models that day, and we saw 2.7 to 57, and we costed that out. There was, Mr. Bartels and a bunch of other people there showing, the numbers, and I thought it was pretty surprising to me to see that 2.7 to 57 come in real close to that 2 to 50.
It's the same.
It's just, it doesn't seem the same when you think about it. The first thing most people say is 50, well, they can retire at 50. And the other one's 57. Well, obviously 50 would be better, but, not everybody gets a stab at starting at, 20 years old or whatever that number is to get at that, to be able to retire at that 50 to 30 years in. So I think we're getting it, as board members are really paying attention to those different models and how they cost, but I think the general public has no clue.
Yes.
And it's taken me this long to figure it out, and I still feel like I'm learning. So I could just imagine how most of the general public feels about that. So in that report, or in consequence, in supplemental reports, if we can be very clear about how to convey that message to the general public.
Yes.
When I'm talking to people, that's usually when their eyes are bleeding over.
Right.
And they kind of go, what does that mean? And so if we can find a way to explain that to them, I think even some board members would appreciate, maybe some layman's terms on how to figure that out.
Okay. And then getting back to that point about the employees, Chief Ferrari also expressed to me the concern that his people have about the transition and how will they fit into it. So we've spent a good deal of time trying to get clarity from PERS. And as you can imagine with pension reform, they're completely overwhelmed right now. They're not answering the phone. They're not answering emails. But we've actually been able to catch them in a couple of different windows. When they returned a phone call one day on another matter, we grabbed them and got some clarity. So we've been doing due diligence with regards to what needs to be done sequentially to fit within the new model, and then also trying to glean from them how that will impact our existing employees, the very question that you raised, Mike. And so we've set aside 3 days after my discussion with Chief Ferrara about their interest, so that we can sit down and talk to them about what it will mean and what it will do to them personally to see whether or not they're interested in the new organization. And unfortunately, those, we don't have complete clarity because we don't know exactly where we're going to fall on some of these issues. But I think we'll have that discussion on Thursday night about where we're going to go next and what it means to those new employees so that we can give them better clarity when we meet with them during that 3-day period. I just budgeted 3 days, figuring that some people would be out of the area, and they might not be able to make one of those meetings, but certainly we'll be open to sitting down with anybody that can't make it during that time frame. The idea is to spend the time with them so that they know where they're at and whether or not it's beneficial for them to stay with Coast Side or to stay with Cal Fire.
Was that a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
I believe it was a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
The only reason I'm asking that, because if I remember right, the CAL FIRE schedule is that you've got people working Sunday, Monday,
Yes.
Tuesday, and
Yes.
others are working Thursday, Friday, Saturday,
Yes.
and then
Correct.
Wednesday sort of a swing day. So-
Yeah, and not knowing that, I think really the point of it was to have a marker and say,
Okay.
and during this week, we're going to meet with the CAL FIRE folks
Okay.
to let them know what it means to them and what the impacts are to see whether they want to be a part of the new organization.
That's fine, as long as you're aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't care exactly what it was, I just, you're,
My big concern is just being flexible, so if somebody does call and say, "Hey, I'm on this Friday," or "I got vacation coming up," that we are accommodating to them.
Yes.
I think it's gonna be a real tough period for them, even if they express a little bit of interest in sitting down and having this conversation and asking the questions that are pertinent to them
Yes.
specifically. I think the more information we can get out in general terms, almost answering some of those specifics, but not, as much as we can up front. My feeling is there are a lot of folks that have never worked for this district other than as an employee for CAL FIRE that want to stay. And I've had several come to me that say, I want to stay here regardless of who it is. So at some point, they're going to have to make that very public. And I'm hoping that it's not a very uncomfortable position for them.
yeah, I think that's important, and I know we can't really answer that here, and you can't answer it, but obviously your communication with the CAL FIRE staff, senior staff, and with their union, et cetera, makes a lot of difference, because obviously we have situations that are already occurring, and how they've got to manage this district until such time as things change.
Correct.
And so, we don't want to get in there and make their management issues any worse than they are,
Correct.
or make their interpersonnel issues any worse than they have to be. So whatever methodology we use to transition across, I hope we sort of, I'm sure you will be, but just be real sensitive.
No, absolutely, and it's certainly an interest of mine to make sure that everybody on all sides is aware of what the options are, what is in front of them, so they can make decisions based on their futures and how it will impact them, so.
So one of the comments I have about the transition process with employees is it's probably going to be, obviously we don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. A lot of it's unknown. I don't know as of yet anybody that's been in the situation where has a district contracting with CAL FIRE for 5 years and moving away from CAL FIRE. But if there are situations out there, I think it's important that maybe we give Dan some direction to seek out and engage some advice if it could be some value to him of that process. Maybe make some phone calls. But the idea is again, no one's ever done this before, from my understanding, and we can learn anything from them. Some positives, the things that they did well, or maybe got lucky on, and there's some things that they forgot to look at that became a fairly large speed bump in that transition process.
I think we have 2 or 3 districts that have done that, but there's also been a number of them that have transitioned away from other organizations in that process. We do have St. Carlos Belmont just recently here. It doesn't deal with all the same things, but it is a good, real recent within our county learning curve. And I think you've already spent a lot of time looking at those issues on both sides. So we will be avoiding a lot of the issues and problems that may otherwise occur.
We've checked with San Carlos and Belmont and other, agencies that have been going through something similar to see, where it is we can, make things easier to transition to or avoid issues that, create sort of a gray picture for people so that they don't know what the answer is or where they're going. So we've spent a lot of time sort of identifying the things that they went through to make sure that we do it more, more clearly and with more efficiency.
Excuse me, Dan, what kind of gray area transition items are you referring to?
Well, I think one example would be, CAL FIRE transitioning out. I've talked to Chief Ferrara, and he's expressed an interest from the state that it happens on, one specific day. CAL FIRE out, new department in. And I've expressed to the chief that it would be more beneficial for both sides that if some CAL FIRE people return to the new organization, that we do it in stages so that people don't have this unknown until, let's say, July 1st of 2013. And so if you look at the contract in terms of when CAL FIRE should depart, is it 120 days? Is it the day you give notice? Is it the day the state says it, which is CAL FIRE state, which is July 1st, 2013? That's kind of gray. When will that date be? And I would argue that if CAL FIRE people want to return, that might be better for both the new Coastside District and CAL FIRE to stage it so that people can do it in stages rather than one fell swoop. Because when you do things in one fell swoop, it's like, moving into a new house. You think you have everything ready, and there are so many pieces, there's so many moving parts that inevitably something gets missed. The moving van doesn't show up, or people don't get fed, or the furniture gets lost. It's that, that's in sort of simplistic terms. So when, CAL FIRE leaves one day and Coastside starts a new day, there are gray issues there in terms of when we can do it, should we do it, is it appropriate to do it. So that would be an example.
My husband moved the whole art museum over a weekend from the building on Van Ness to the new building on 3rd. So I know he had to make sure every employee had a desk, a phone,
Right.
Pencils were in there and everything. But are you going to have a person that would be appointed to do the actual switchover?
Oh, I think that would be a good idea, because I think all of us have been involved. I was just recently involved with transitioning, 2 offices that had, maybe like your husband's, 2 offices for many, many years, 20 plus years, and with extraordinary planning, bringing them together on a certain drop-dead date and still had issues. So yeah, absolutely, someone would need to coordinate that. And we might even have several people that are working with the employees, and people that are working with the mechanical things, and people that are working with things that fall off the table, sort of crisis management. So I think that would be a good idea for sure. It's too big of an issue. There's too many moving parts.
Okay.
So yeah, that makes sense.
One of my concerns too is this is before obviously I was here, was that we truly transitioned into CAL FIRE. So it was a station at a time, from my understanding, and the concern for me is, if that's how, and it was really, I think, maybe their preference, because really we were signing a contract with them to take over our fire service here on the coast side. So it wasn't so much of what worked best maybe for us, but it was, how they were going to manage the operation moving forward. We were going to still be here as a district. I think, from my understanding, we were as open about that transition process as possible. They had more experience in taking over a fire service, a fire department, than we've never had any experience in, as a district going, being taken over by another agency. So my concern is what's good for them coming in should be good for them going out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to maybe look at the the goods and bads, right? The pluses and the minuses, and figure out what makes the most sense that's beneficial for us, right? And also what's beneficial and negative for them and us too, and then figure out the right plan, because I think this planning process is so important. And if we don't know, and we're both, when I say both, I mean us, you, and CAL FIRE, Chief Ferrara and his replacement person, that you guys are on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
I'm real concerned too with personnel. When you start getting mixed crews, there's some guy that's staying, some guy that's leaving. Human beings are human beings, and unfortunately, and that potentially, if we sit here with a bunch of people, especially for a long period of time, who've identified, I'm going to the new organization, you've got another group that says I'm not going, how does that affect the efficiency of the service delivery? Just because we need to recognize that human beings are human beings.
Agreed.
So those are all, and you've had the experiences, so it's not something that's just sort of really operational that I don't want to get involved in it, but I will express my concern.
I agree, and I think that's why it's good to hear from both the people that want to return and those people that won't, and the chiefs, and get all of that input so that we can come up with something that works reasonably well for everyone.
I have one more comment too.
Yes.
So my concern, we've talked about this at board meetings, and I'm hoping Gene's kind of relayed this to you prior to you coming on board. We have a transitional MOU that's in place till the end of the year. And it respects the line guys. It doesn't, and it's just the line people. It has nothing to do with management, it has nothing to do with support staff. I mean, I think we got 2 marvelous support people in here. We have no idea where they fall. And I think we have battalion chiefs, we have assistant chiefs, we have, people in the fire prevention bureau. I think there's a lot of people that aren't included in that transitional piece. It's my feeling, and I'm one more board member of 5, so you're gonna have to, figure out, where everybody else sits on this, but we look at that transition and talk about including, I think, the people that aren't specifically part of that contract, so that we're respectful of that too. I think, moving to CAL FIRE, they're now all CAL FIRE employees, and the ability for them to want to come back and work for us, I think, and we be respectful of that, I think is super important. And then on the same note, one of my other concerns is any new hire, if we look at this, that's a key position, so maybe a position that's other than the line people, or positions where it's going to be, let's just say it's going to be a fire chief, it's going to be a fire marshal, whatever that be, that those people that come into those positions understand we're looking for long-term employees. I think this is the whole push for this. And if we're looking for long-term employees, the last thing I want is maybe somebody coming on board and working for a year or 2 and they're gone. And if they're new employees to us, are we on the hook for all their retirement? Majority of their retirement? I mean, some of it, obviously, their benefits and some other things. So I want to lay that all out, because we had situations in the past where you have, people that worked here for a very short period of time and they have lifetime medical.
Yes.
And that burns the public. And it's completely unsustainable.
Burns me.
Well, of course, and me too, but the idea is it's just, how do you pay for that,
Well, that's one
As
of
a
the
district.
questions that did come up, is apparently the board has already taken action on the benefits plan, which is a much lower cost, the medical being one of them. So that I've looked at several different firms that manage outside the PERS system savings plans, essentially savings plans for their health care when they retire. And one of the things that I've suggested that we can present to the board on Thursday, if you wish, is perhaps some kind of incentive for those people that would stay, might have this alternative plan that would be similar to what they came in with, because to lose that entire benefit is pretty radical. To have something and then go to nothing is pretty radical. So is the district interested in funding something in between what used to be and what the new benefit package plan is for those people returning? Perhaps those people that are seasoned, people that have some experience that would be good for the well-being of the department.
Well, I think it's sort of it's that transitional issue versus a true new employee.
Yes.
Somebody that's coming in at age 20, 21 has time to build a savings program or whatever, or the district can do that, is to build a savings program where it's up front, it's negotiated in the MOU, et cetera, so that when they do retire, they've got something to deal with
Yes.
that.
Yes.
When you're looking for experienced people coming in, which you have a need of having a certain number of those, or the people that we already have, or had, then you've got to somehow accommodate them. But at the same time, you don't want to flash in the pan. You definitely don't want somebody that says, okay, I'm going to come over, yeah, I'm going to be part of the new department, and 6 months later puts in their retirement papers.
Yes, correct.
I mean, that's.
No, and that's what's happened in many organizations, and that's why there's public outcry about that. And so I think the district has expressed from that document prior to my coming is that we need to get control of those costs. And so I think what we'll do for you is have some scenarios, some models laid out of what that might look like. And then perhaps on Thursday, the board can give direction for more clarity on that. So I think something that I've kicked around with Susan is some kind of incentive plan for seasoned people that would come back, and the longer they stay, perhaps the greater that benefit would be to help cover that cost. And if you leave after a short period of time, then certainly you wouldn't be able to capture that benefit. So something along those lines, just not so much this is what it is, but just for something to the board to consider. And then that might start some discussions to see what's affordable and what is not, and whether that would work. And that's part of the gray area that was, that I was referring to, are those types of things. Where are we at with those things where people had a certain benefit, prior to leaving, and then they come back, does it disappear? So that's some of that gray area also what I was referring to. And so you hit right on top of that one. That's one of the big ones. So I think we can get some more clarity on that one Thursday as well, or give direction to get even more clarity.
Yeah, because it's very important that whatever salary, whatever benefits, whatever, as we do a 5-year projection, et cetera, to me, it's very important that we tie those to the district's capability of paying. Historically in the past, when we were in, especially in the where taxes, where property tax revenues were shooting up through the ceiling, we were seeing 10% increases every year, et cetera.
Yes.
You could go out and negotiate 5%. That you would get a 5% raise for the next 5 years with a union, and you'd be fine. But today, when taxes are flat, or or varying, or it really depends upon what projects come online, etc. And you're a district, we have a limited capability of paying, and so that's one of the things I think is looking at your benefits and your salaries, etc., that are directly tied to the districts, because the last thing I think anybody wants in this day and age is to be in that situation of saying, we've got to go out and we've got to ask for a tax increase because we promised too much in our wage and benefits package. And since probably 80 to 90% of our cost is wages and benefits, that really is a big piece of what goes on.
Okay.
So that's, I think that's very important. And if we do that, then we've got control back again of what our expenses are.
Correct.
I think the other concern too is I think the entire board's fully developed to equaling out that tax.
Well, that's part of the issue, and so that's what I'm talking about. So when I talk about property tax is not special taxes, not all the rest of the other issues that are sitting out there. And that allows us the capability of dealing with those without wages and benefits being impacted by them.
Right, but also to take into account, so he has acknowledged that, Point Montero had an benefit assessment passed by their citizens like 15 years ago, and it was, they were struggling with ERAF and how to run their fire district without enough money. So they put together that benefit assessment, and passed it, and it was a 0 to I think $250. It's now down to 115-ish. It's every year's been going down, and the idea is, I think the current city board right now is feeling like we want to get that in line with what our benefit assessment is down here, which is $35. Now there's arguments that say, we're one district, which we are, but there's other arguments that say there's 4 times as many, people being taxed down here, which raises about the same amount of money as, what theirs is up there. So I get both sides of the argument, right? And I want to figure out what's right. At the same time, I want to find ways to minimize that disparity between the two, right? So there's this argument of what we pay and what they pay. I would rather not have that there. It's something that I think divides everything even more. It's just another thing to have a discussion about. We got to figure that out. But those are things you need to take into account from I think a budget standpoint. I think from what we have to operate with, and understanding that. I think that's the board's general direction, is finding a way to fix that, and that's going to bring, that's going to impact this cost-wise.
Well, hopefully your property taxes go up in comparison to your
Assessment
you know,
tax.
the assessment tax coming down. Because at the time, Montera had one station.
Right.
Montera, Moss Beach had one station, so they were paying when Montera and Half Moon Bay were both independent districts, they were paying a little less than 1/3 of the cost of running the Coastside Fire Department.
Right.
And that tax was necessary in order for them to carry that 1/3 burden.
Right.
You're right, now the joining, and so what you're doing is the process of shifting those costs of running the Moss Beach Montera station are being shifted into the taxpayers from the Half Moon Bay or Granada region. Now, that's, I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's what the process that's occurring. And so we sort of got to monitor, that. And so that says that too, is when you come and look at a model that is based upon property tax or increase or something like that, you can't say we're going to be dealing with 100% of the increase, maybe 75% of the increase or something else, because there's got to be that piece that allows the board to absorb these other costs and still maintain.
Right.
So it's another thing to take into account.
It is, and we've looked at the tax base. I've talked to Susan at length about that, the strength and the viability of the existing, property taxes and where they're at. So we've run those trends that I referred to earlier, where the taxes have been in the previous 2 years and where they're going forward. And those are some of those conservative numbers because, as we've all seen, property taxes roll back in recent years was never seen before. And one of those issues is ERAF. Is ERAF going to hold up? ERAF is very volatile in the state, but so far we think it's still going to hold up, and we were very concerned that it wasn't. But anyway, those whole tax base issues are really important. It's something that we looked at very closely with those budget projections.
I'll let you continue.
Well, I was just
Chime in with
yeah.
You probably answered most of my questions.
We made like a 22-point list of things that we've been working on, and one thing leads into another, and it's the main themes: the timeline, where's PERS and pension reform, the transition costs, being able to flip the switch here and having the capability to create a new organization. Again, those things I referred to earlier. Sitting down and meeting with the employees, looking at those tax bases, exploring other companies or vehicles that would provide that. That benefit that some people had prior to, going to CAL FIRE, and whether that can be done again, because there's a lot of legal matters there. So we'll do a presentation on that. I looked into the fire code, wanted to make sure that, we talked to PERS, there were a number of different things that we had to get in order for them to approve the second tier. And they sort of have these list of things that you have to do, it's sort of a checkoff list when you create the organization. And we've identified those things. We have job descriptions, and we look at the fire code. All of these things, they have to make sure that essentially the fire departments are in alignment with what their requirements are at the state level since PERS was formed. Trying to look for any items that I didn't mention in that sort of overview. There's a few things that are on, that I'm working on that I haven't been able to spend as much time on as I had hoped in the last couple of weeks. And, that would be things like the rules and the policy manuals. I think those things can come a little bit later, but a good review of those, a thorough review of those, I think would be beneficial to the district. So I'll be getting to those things in the coming weeks if that's still the direction of the board. Again, we looked at all the internal personal protective equipment, the vehicles. There's a laundry list of things that you'll see in the budget report that are related to the transition cost. For example, the SCBA's, that's the breathing apparatus. Does the district own them, or does CAL FIRE? Much like I mentioned with the apparatus. And after spending a good deal of time with Chief Cole, I was able to identify who owns what and where it's at, and it's all laid out there. So if there's any questions about it, I think we can take a look at it and explore further if there's some concerns from the board or the public or Chief Cole for that matter. We're going to have for you a recommendation to go through a company named FireHire that does firefighter recruitments. Essentially, they established a raw firefighter recruitment list, and they offer the list probably 500 people, 500 medics, and maybe 500 firefighters. You take an exam, you get placed on the list, and they offer that list to contract agencies. So on Thursday, we're going to have you hopefully approve the contract to be with FireHire. There's no obligation, and you don't pay them anything. You only pay them if you hire people off of their list. I believe the fee is $800 per employee. So every new employee that we hire would cost $800. It's a viable company that's been around for probably 15 or 20 years.
So this allows us to, since they're passing an exam,
Yes.
we know that they have a minimal, a solid basic level of understanding of fire service and what goes on.
Correct.
We know they've gone through a physical, they do a
They do
physical
what they call
agility too,
CPAT, yes.
so that we know that they have a basic physical capability of doing the job. So
Correct.
all those costs have been taken away from us, is to have to test for those.
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So that's,
Yeah, so many years ago, we would all conduct our own tests for various reasons. We want our own local people, or we want to tailor the test to our specific needs. If you're in a large city, you want to tailor to that. If you're a smaller agency, you might want to tailor to other specific things that are important to you. And they're very, very time consuming, and they're very, very costly, and they expire after a short period of time. So I don't think it'd be beneficial to the district at this point to hire, to create and developing this test. It would be too time consumptive and too expensive to do. So FireHire is a good alternative, and what you can do is you can have certain people tailored to your specific needs. As an example, just as an example, let's say you wanted to have your volunteers be a part of the new recruitment process. Well, then you can distill out certain layers of things that you want, that being one of them that's important to the district, and look at those people first. So cities can look at whatever they want. With my previous employment in San Mateo, it was very important for us to get local people in the area. We wanted people to be local in the event of emergency, because a lot of agencies now, people are living too far away. So we placed a greater importance of that, and probably in the last 5 years, maybe 90% of the people, maybe 7 or 8 years, 90% of the people have been local people. Firefighters that live in Redwood City and Half Moon Bay, and so they're always there at a moment's notice. They're always there for fundraisers and public outreach and those types of things. That was important to that area. So the district can do the same thing with FireHire. They can take a look at the people that they have, and they can select those that they want. They might have a certain, perhaps it's an intelligent core, the highest score people get the interviews first, whatever the district so chooses. And you're not obligated until you hire those people off that list. And really, it's a very low-cost way of getting those people. And they've served dozens, if not hundreds, of different departments throughout the state. So it's a well-known, well-researched company. So we'll be requesting that you sign an agreement with them. And again, no obligation other than if you hire from people, you got to follow the rules, which is you'll pay them a certain fee for every person that you hire.
Sounds reasonable. Have you had experience hiring from that list?
I have. In fact, we've hired, in my experience as a fire chief, is we hired the lion's share of the people from FireHire, and it was very, very successful for us.
we've had pretty good success here too. In fact, I think when we went away from it, is when we created some of our biggest problems.
And some people don't like it. There's some naysayers that say, oh, you just get a list of people that, they take the score and you don't know who they are. But I think if you analyze the people like we had done, and you look at the quality and the character of those people, you can interview as many people as you want. You can interview 100 people for 15 positions and get those very best cream of the crop type individuals.
And this is an initial screening process.
Correct. It's a screening process.
Yeah, because for example, I recall that we at one point had, you had to pass a swim test.
Yes.
So there's definitely other issues that can be important to the district that you then do a second level of screening. So this is sort of saying that everybody that we're looking at here has the basic tools to do the job.
That's right.
And then from then on, you're going to look at your background checks, you're going to look at your own medical, you're going to look at all these other things that you want to have that are important
Yes.
to the district. But you've at least eliminated the kid that walked in off the street and put in his application just out of high school and has never thought, and is doing it because a buddy is doing it.
That's correct.
And has never had any background, whatever.
Yeah, you get essentially an entire background on each individual, and you pick those people that you want to come in for that interview process for your new employees. Now, that would be for the new employees. People with the existing employees, we plan in that timeline that you'll see an interview process and a background process, because you want to make sure those individuals that you're bringing in that are existing firefighters are of the character that you want, and go through the typical hiring process, which is a standard interview, and then, of course, the background check to make sure that everything's clean, with the assumption that they're full-time employees, they should be fine. But I think it'd be beneficial for the district to spend money up front for that background so that you don't run into issues with some things that have transpired since people have been hired. You want to make sure that you hire the very best, because there's a lot of people out there that are willing to do the job. So you should get those best people.
Absolutely. One of my biggest concerns, and again, I don't know how the whole board feels about it, but the issue of going to CAL FIRE was we had high turnover, 2 years, 10 people, whatever that number was. And now we've been with CAL FIRE, and I've learned there's assigned people to the district, and there's people that are limited term, covering a position for a short period of time, and then there's people that are just covering a shift, an overtime shift, a sick, whatever. We have a lot more employees here, and that was an issue back then. To me, it's a bigger issue now, because I keep meeting new people. Almost every board meeting I meet a new firefighter, and it's not uncommon to never see them again, and for me that's a concern. My other issue is the fact that we've got to find a way to, I think, incentivize or whatever it is, just to reward long-term employees. And to me, I know you can't make people live here. Say we hired to tell somebody that, from the list, and they've been on the coast side, and the next thing you know, they moved to Sacramento. We can't. That's that. So I would like to find a way. My biggest concern is long-term employees. If they're local, it's even more of a plus. And I don't know if you can, reward them or pay more, to try to keep as many local people as possible. But it's something that's a big concern of mine. Is first, long-term employees. And second is obviously if they live in the district or real close to the district. We're talking, like you said, less than half an hour there. It's easy to help with, a major emergency. It's not a huge task to maybe stay, past their shift because it's a needed issue. It's my understanding that it's hard to get people to come back when they have callbacks for overtime, or they have a holding pattern. If they don't live close, it's very difficult to get people back here.
Yes.
In our current situation right now, because they live extremely far from, an easy drive to work.
And I think that's a good point. I think that's probably the interest with most employers, is to have, sort of camaraderie and teamwork, and people that are, part of the organization, stay part of the organization. I think that's naturally what people want. And I think, Mike, on that, I think one of the reasons why I sort of favor the fire hire model is, number one, the district doesn't have time to, conduct its own tests. There's not enough time to do that.
And resources, right?
Yes.
Don't you have to get people from other fire departments to come volunteer and help you out and do a background? I mean, I've sat in the process for police officers where they want you to go in and conduct a 5-person panel, and you have to ask them questions. You have to interview them, and you're not part of that organization. You're just someone with some knowledge.
Right.
So the idea that we don't have those people.
Yeah.
And you're going to ask people to come over and help volunteer to do that.
And I think we would, on that very process, I think the interview process, we would look for leaders from throughout the area that would help conduct the interviews for the time frames that are allocated for that. But the, the initial startup of a test, posting it and having a manual manipulative test and how it's going to work and who's going to monitor the stations is very, labor and time intensive. So we just simply don't have the time. So this is a viable alternative, and if the district so chooses to go another route next time, that's perfectly fine. But I think it's a good, viable, easy way to get to where you want to be. And Mike, perhaps when time permits, after we get through some of these things on Thursday, if you want me to sort of extract the interests that you have and how best to serve that, have people be a part of the community, maybe we can do kind of an analysis on what it was to be successful. My experience was we were extraordinarily successful with it. A lot of local people that stayed local, that are very, very engaged, that are of high caliber, people that were scoring in the highest of their fire academies. And, we just didn't tolerate people that were less than that. We went and got people that were very good, and we spent a lot of time up front doing the interviews, doing the backgrounds to get that cream, and been very, very successful. So I'm hoping that, that would be the direction of the board to do the same thing, emulate that same success. Because it's in your hands. You do what you want. You direct your people and your chiefs as to the type of individuals you want, and you just extract them from that list.
So the other issue too, obviously, is once we have a chief on board, it's really up to them. We'll make it very clear we've been accused of, or at least I've been accused of, and the comments I've made, and they've been twisted to the point where it's me that wants that person hired and that person hired. Be very clear. I feel fortunate to have you on board to be able to do a lot of this stuff, because I don't know how to do this stuff. I don't have any background in this stuff. Okay, and the idea is you do, and I think that was, and I'll be very clear about this. I was very frustrated that the board didn't hire a contract administrator when they went to CAL FIRE. The grand jury recommended it. I think that was the biggest mistake they made. And the issue is that contract administrator, in my opinion, worked for the district. Similar to the situation we're now right with you. You know about this stuff. You've had 30 plus years of experience with this stuff. You don't. I have a real job, and I want to be able to. I think the board have to be able to task you on certain things that need to get done, and know it gets taken care of.
Yeah, and we're not. The thing is, Dan is not. While we've approved his contract, you're part of a consulting team, and he really is. It's through the team. You're here as a member of the team, so we not only have Dan's expertise in this, but we have all the other team members' expertise also that comes to play. So we're really giving them. I don't want to get this that somehow we're giving instructions directly to Dan.
Right. But the bigger issue was.
But as a representative of the team.
Well, we had Brian Kelly as part of that team.
Yeah.
And he helped on specific, work rules and some other things that we needed. But, I think replacing him with you on that team is huge, and that, you have a lot of experience in some of these issues that we're discussing. But
Well, I think what happened is when I got on board, very quickly learned that all of these pieces were the things that needed to be identified.
Mm-hmm.
And so I even had to tell my own team members, I don't want to step on any toes here, and if I am, please let me know, because I almost very quickly got out front in terms of all of these little pieces that are taking place. And that's my area, that's the area that I was experienced in. And so, being very cautious with my team members, they were fine. They said, no, that's great, and it seems that you're comfortable with that, and I'll talk with the board about that, but that's been sort of my areas, is things like fire hire and the capital outlay and these budgeting issues, things that, Susan's very good with the numbers, she's very high caliber, but, questioning to make sure that it's correct, I think is the experience that we all bring together. So.
Excuse me, Dan, who were the team members you're referring to?
Richard Bolanos, Gene Savory, and Susan George. I believe you probably met all of them.
You didn't mention who they were. So
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Asking.
So they asked me to be a part of it, and the board approved it, and so here I am in the middle of a lot of transition issues.
Anything else you need to cover?
No, I think those were the main points. I didn't know how this meeting was going to be conducted today, and I apologize if I didn't present it in a more structured fashion, but
As long as you
I
don't
thought it
have
was
any
gonna be-
answers, if you don't need any other answers from us before Thursday. then
No,
we'll
I made a
just-
few notes of things that you want me to be prepared for on Thursday, so I'll try to capture what I can, and I would just caution the board, if we don't have all the things that you're looking for on Thursday, we'll immediately adjust to whatever those needs are, so that we can take this thing wherever the board chooses to go.
What kind of a work schedule are you planning for? I know CAL FIRE has 3-day work weeks.
The new COSI fire would be, the new COSI, you talking about the new agency, would be the 56-hour week?
Okay.
Yeah, I think CAL FIRE is the 72, is it 72? Yeah.
72, but then the problem with them is then when you start to count in, it comes on the surface, it's a 72-hour week, but then you count in 12 extra days off this year for personal leave.
Correct.
You count in the vacation days, you count in the furlough days, you count in all these other things that the governor has instilled within them, and it really smashes, it's a 3-day on, 4-day off shift, but when you add all these extra days on, I think it worked out, last time I looked at it, it actually works out that they actually work, I think, 10 more days per year than the people that are working under the 24, the 222, the R&D, the 2-4 shift.
So what does that come out to in the work week then, as far as hours go, with your extra 10 days?
Extra 10 days.
You said 10 days or 12 days off, vacation, furlough days. Works out
Well,
to 10 days
there's
extra
12
a
days
year.
personal leave days were given, then they had furlough days. In fact, if you read yesterday's
10 times.
San Mateo Times.
Pumpkin Festival all day,
Okay,
sorry.
pick up Sunday's San Mateo Times, the lead article on the front page is dealing with the massive accumulation of time off that is occurring within the state. Because,
Untaken days off, you mean?
well, untaken days off because they just can't. They've got so many days off now in their schedule that they can't take them.
Yeah.
And so what it's resulting in is these massive buyouts now in excess of $200,000 or greater, almost basically a whole year's worth of additional salary that is being paid off on their leaving. And it's just kicking the can down the road.
My other issue is like this 12 extra PLP days. We had no say in that. It was just something that the state of California, CAL FIRE negotiated with their union. My question was, what's our fiscal impact?
Well, at the moment, we're paying it out of our state pocket rather than out of our local pocket, but it's still coming out of your and my tax pocket.
It's still something.
But it's, but there's been, we're sitting here, 2 years ago, we were notified that the state wasn't going to tolerate this anymore, and they were going to add it to our cost. Now, they haven't done it, and I don't know why. That's their choice, but nevertheless, it sits out there.
So the 72 hours work week is really more than 72 hours because of those extra days, is that what you're saying?
No, they're less.
Less, okay.
The other issue
So
that
it's more
a lot of people don't
equivalent
know-
to the other plan.
Right.
The other issue that people don't realize is the fact that you have to have more employees, right, to cover their overtime and their vacation that's on the books. It's an
Because they
issue we're
don't
having
pay
right
time and a
now.
half,
What's that?
because they don't pay the overtime at time and a half.
No, they do. We do.
All right.
Yeah, the issue for us is you have to have more employees to cover all those vacation times. So it's not what's scheduled, it's truly how many people either are assigned to the district and/or are here to cover those vacation times, those PLP days. The list goes on. So there are goods and bads to both, but I will tell you, it's a 72-hour work week, it's a mandatory 19 hours overtime. Okay, you want to talk about overtime? The issue of somebody showing up that's, on their last 8 hours of their 19 hours overtime shift, or somebody that's got the 56-hour work week's got, 5 hours overtime in it? There's a smaller number, but it's dramatically different. So there's goods and bads to both. So, concern for me.
Question?
Yeah, the fire hire organization sounds like a very large organization. What particular area would we be dealing with? Who would we be talking to?
Actually, it's not a very large organization. It's actually very small, and they they make sure that people pass their CPAT test, which is the physical agility that's recognized by the state fire services. And so the firefighters that are applying to fire hire to take the written test go out and get their CPAT test, which is the qualifier that I'm physically fit to be a firefighter. So they take care of that on their own. Then they come into fire hire and take a written exam that's a recognized, validated, fire service exam that demonstrates that they have knowledge, of the fundamentals of the fire service and, essential intelligence. And they get a score. They get a written score. So when you call fire hire and say, we need your list, they send you a paramedic column, people that are trained paramedics that have their paramedic license, and non-paramedic, brand new entry-level firefighters. So you have your 2 columns of firefighters. They have their CPAT, their physical, and now they have the written, and you can see what their written score was. Generally, the people off the upper end of the list, out of the hundreds that are on there, get called first because they have a higher written score. You want the people that are smarter. So you take that grouping and you say, what is it that I want? Do I want a medic? Do I want a cliff rescue person? Do I want a hazardous materials person? And all of these things that these people bring, guys that are men and women that are going to college and getting certifications, they attach in their application all those essentials that they have as part of their package of a brand new firefighter. So, for example, Belmont San Carlos had the hazardous materials team for the county. They may be looking on the fire hire list for people that have hazardous materials training on their own. They already got it. They already got certified with a number of different classes. I used to be a hazmat guy, and it's pretty comprehensive. Chemistry and a number of different classes. So if they're looking for hazmat people, they might go to the people that have been through those hazmat courses, so they don't have to run the brand new guy through it. They've already got the person that they're picking was already a hazardous materials trained person, brand new, albeit brand new, but they can easily acclimate into that hazardous materials world. So you ask them for the list, they give you the 2 columns, and then you start looking at who those people are that you identify to be of interest to your particular department.
And where are they based? Are they a national organization or are they?
No, they're a California organization. They're based in, I think, the Sacramento area. And they manage the list, they manage the people. If people get hired, for example, they drop them off the list and they'll say, John Doe has been hired by Sacramento Fire, drop him from your list. So they correspond with the agency, and this is part of that contract that the board would approve, is when people drop off the list, or let's say somebody had a criminal problem, then they would say, remove that person off the list, he's a criminal, or something happened. So they manage the list and keep the list fresh for the agency that's contracting with them.
Okay.
So the district, from this point forward, would constantly get updates and fresh lists every time they conduct a test, every time they add people, because things are moving. People are getting hired, people are adding on, and so they give you that fresh list over and over to choose from.
One of the things that I remember from long ago when before they came around, before they existed, was one of the things that, and you may remember that, is when people started challenging physical agility exams, for example, and say, this job has this particular exam, physical agility exam, but the exam being offered is restrictive in that it doesn't allow for minority hires, or that it does some other thing. It was being challenged in court. And so a lot of expense was being made by districts or fire departments in order to certify their particular physical agility exam. So now what we have is the benefit of an exam that is certified. And since you're picking from a certified exam, you're not having to deal with all those other pieces of complication. The same thing for the written exam. Separate exam, paramedics have to sit an additional exam over and above what normal EMTs sit, so that they're tested on their additional ability. So it's not just a matter that they hold a paramedic license, but now they've got to come back and actually show that a year later or 2 years later, they still know.
Yeah.
They still know the stuff. And we've all been through classes where, 2 hours after you walk out of the exam, if they handed you the exam again,
Yeah.
you'd be sitting there going, oh my. So it's important not only to pass the class, but it's important to show that you have a continuing knowledge of the subject matter.
I think that's a good point too. City of San Francisco is a great example of lists that are frequently challenged and end up in court literally years and years and years. I've seen people sitting in San Francisco for close to 10 years on some list because it was litigated and just tied up in court. So it avoids that. And then they make their money, Fire Hire makes their money by these new recruits paying a fee to get on their list. They take the test, they take the written test, they pay Fire Hire fee, and then they're on that list. So that's how they make their money, is they charge a small fee to each of them.
And from us.
And then from us, yeah.
From any district that uses the list.
Yeah, and I think from us, the $800 fee is just really, really low comparatively to if we ran our own test.
Oh.
And Fire Hire wouldn't be able to stay in business because there aren't that many people hired. There's not a huge turnaround. So they make it by some of the hires from the various departments like this district, if it so chooses, and then those applicants taking the test to be on their list and having a qualified list. Yes?
How much does the applicant have to pay?
I don't know what it is. I don't know. $50, $100, $200.
Well, less than the 800 anyway.
Oh, yeah, a lot less. Yes.
So is there anything that you need from the board in regards to direction, other things you're doing? At the wall line, or you want to, don't want to be stepped on?
I don't think so at this point. There's a few unknowns that we're trying to get clarity on this week, and I think that my guess is we'll be on Thursday. After some discussion, we're going to have some more homework to follow up on. What I'm trying to do with my part of it and with the other folks on the team is to present to you some clarity, on what that benefit package is going to look like, what that timeline is going to look like. A lot of those pieces I think were too loose for me, to feel comfortable with. And so we certainly may not have all of the answers for you, but I think we're going to have a lot of answers to create some really good discussion. And then we might have to run out and do some homework and have another special meeting or wait until a November meeting to provide some more clarity.
Well, I think there's things like, we talk about what is the amount of money, for example, for medical benefits,
Correct.
retirement medical benefits. What's the amount of money that should be deposited into an account or set aside for an account every year?
Yes.
And obviously, that's based upon the district's ability to pay,
Yes.
but it's also based upon an actuarial that says this is the amount of money you need to accumulate. But until you know how many people you have in that group, you can't really run an actuarial. So,
Correct.
so there's definitely things that are going to have to be done long-term
Yes.
in order to still stay fiscally responsible.
Correct.
That are not going to be able to be accomplished at this point.
And I wouldn't recommend, I said this to the team, I wouldn't recommend that the board put themselves in a position where they can't afford certain things. I mean, now's the time to make adjustments and make sure that it's affordable. I wouldn't want to leave in a year and not have things be affordable or you need to know exactly what's going on, and that was one of the reasons for driving the 5-year projections and making sure that you're viable and have strength into the future and not just for a short window.
My big concern too is obviously, both ends of the spectrum. We've got San Carlos, who they have all their employees, all the line guys, gals. I mean, they're subbing up the work for their management and operations with Redwood City. You have, basically the lowest paying, model being supported from a different part of their model from one of the highest paying departments. And now you have a situation where they just went through early retirement, 17 people. So what do you think is going to happen when they're, looking for some new firefighters, and you got a bunch of people already kind of part of the system, already have a relationship, boom.
Yes.
Now, from my understanding, they're kind of being consumed by that model now. And then you have, on the flip side, when we looked at the numbers, we saw, here's St. Carlos, here's Belmont, drastically different. And how is that sustainable? They have, do they have a good tax base to be able to support this new fire department basically when they split from St. Carlos?
Correct.
There's big concern of where they're at with their 5-year projection.
Yes.
Well, there's all kinds of things. We know San Mateo has taken some major, their union has well, in fact, 2400 is county-wide has made tremendous concessions, realizing, unlike San Jose, they've chosen to protect the people. That people are more important than dollars.
Yes.
San Jose firefighters took the position that dollars were more important than people. So
That's their issue.
Yeah, and cost them dearly.
Yeah, it's definitely that balance. And it's good to be in the seat where you can actually make those decisions.
You know, one of the neat things that you know, and Chief Cole went with us to Sacramento, and we'll share what we learned a lot of talk about pension reform, and they had the legal aides that were actually drafting, you know, help the legislators drafting the law. We're up there talking, and the questions being, sent their way were interesting, because they were able to say, no, the intent for us was to talk about this and not go over here. So where you're coming from on this question has no bearing. We were wanting to focus on this. It was good for us to see that up there. But they had two attorneys up there.
Yeah.
An attorney for, he mostly represents law enforcement, but also fire. And then you had another attorney representing the cities and counties, and how they're both dealing with pension reform, and how they both feel. It was neat, because they were both very, very polite and professional to each other, but they both understood where each other was coming from. So it was a very good discussion. But we'd be happy to share with you anything you got up there regarding, kind of what's the temperature up in Sacramento, because it's a concern for us.
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things is the statement that pension reforms that came in from the state really is not going to affect the state for another 30 years. They're really taking the changes that they put in place, no matter how dramatic they talk about or that they, in reality, they're not going to affect the current state workforce. That they're intending that this is new people coming in, and they figure it's going to take 30 years to get these people out of here before we see any real effect. I think the advantage we have is basically the ability to implement a lot of those changes today.
Right.
And because we're starting out fresh, and so we have the ability, it's not having to wait 30 years for something to happen, but to say today that there are changes that we can make today that significantly affect our long-term, and I think that's the whole thing this is about, is long-term.
But also,
long-term viability.
The discussion was the fact that you make these changes now, and it really doesn't affect the existing employees, that are currently employed. It's, the question was, well, who's this pension reform going to affect the most? It's actually us. When you look at the ability for us to hire brand new employees that have never worked here before, and I'm talking about, that aren't coming from another, coming back, but new employees. And we're gonna, of anybody in that room, I think it was us that was sitting there going, wow, we could actually have a huge impact, like January 2nd. If we have new employees, this will absolutely affect our bottom line and what the taxpayers are on the hook for. So that was huge. I was very happy to hear about that. But, people need to understand that for existing departments or existing organizations that have employees, they got rid of some things like spiking and all these other things that were very irritating kind of loopholes. I think from the taxpayer's point of view, I was excited to be in that room and hear, all the positives that could really come our way.
Dan?
Yes.
I have a question about, you have a lot of unknown factors, and you haven't presented them yet. They're going to be presented Thursday night?
Most of them will be presented, but the illustration that I was giving you as an example would be, well, I gave you one about the moving, but another one might be the employees that want to return from either former Coastside or former CAL FIRE.
And your timeline is not set yet, correct?
No, the timeline's set to have conversations with them.
But will that be rolled out on Thursday night?
Yes, it's in there. And as an example would be sitting down with those people and seeing what their interests are, and what is the district willing to do to bring those people back. So that's an unknown, and until you talk to those people, and see what the district is willing to do or afford is kind of a gray unknown.
And you plan to do that late October, early November?
Yeah,
you
almost
said?
immediately, within a couple of weeks of Thursday's meeting, and I put it up front. It's one of the first things to do.
And, there's a recall, and that election will be certified after October 26th, when the petitions all get turned in.
Yes.
So are you factoring in the possible special election in the earlier part of the year?
To be quite honest with you, the team talked about it and what that means to us and how we move with this timeline. So what I did was move forward with Thursday's meeting, get all this out and rolled out, moving as if it's not going to be there, and then if that happens, then we may have to change course. So to be quite honest,
What would that change of course involve?
I really don't know. I don't know what the recall means, because as far as I understand, if the recall gets the votes, then there would be a vote sometime, I believe, in the first to the middle part of the new year.
That's what I understand.
And so do you march all the way until that point and then have, another fork of the road plan, or do you stay with the plan that you have? I think the first step is to see whether there's enough signatures. And if that's the case, then the team would probably say, okay, now what does that mean for us? How far?
Reevaluate.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think the public would be interested in that on Thursday nights. So.
Absolutely.
Yes. And the other concern too is, if you look at it, October 26th, the elections office has 30 days to certify the signatures. And then from there, pending any lawsuits or litigation, you have, 85 to 125 days, about a 4-month window to have the election called. So you're talking, first quarter of next year. So we don't have time to, in my opinion, we have CAL FIRE who's been very adamant, we have a drop dead date, and we're, and this is our date, which is January 30th. So to I think get sidelined by the what ifs is something to take into account, but certainly it doesn't dictate this process, in my opinion. The issue for me, whether they're successful or not, is what's best for the COSA. But what people don't understand is you have an issue where they're assuming the recall, petition gatherers, that if they actually get it on ballot and actually win, let's just say they recall 3 of the board members, there's 3 people that have to be elected at that election, and then all 3 of those people, let's just say, hands down, have to be pure supporters of CAL FIRE. They want no other solution, which drives me, which is just hilarious, because our job here is to look for the best solution. And when you have people that, in their mind, and in their conversation, CAL FIRE is the only solution, right? And let's just say they get elected, you have to guarantee that you have enough votes to continue with CAL FIRE, but by that time, this process is well underway where it almost doesn't matter, in my opinion. So it's frustrating, it's kind of a waste, but the recall election is supposed to cost $130 grand. Just this is what our job is, to be able to figure out what the best solution is, and now we're being hamstrung by these recallers, because this is what they think is their only solution. So it's the process what we do.
Excuse Catherine has her hand up.
You said the drop dead date was January 30?
No, June 30.
June 30.
If I said January, I was mistaken.
You
The
said
drop date.
January.
The end of the contract was June 30th. You know that, right?
You said January 30.
If I did, I made a mistake.
I'm not apologizing, but I was verifying that you had made a mistake, because if things shift that radically, it would be important to know.
Well,
I
as
also
you know-
thought there was that the board was going to make a final decision by December 30. But it sounds like you're moving toward, you're not considering other alternatives, you are moving entirely to a new department.
You have a good point, and this discussion is moving forward. I think when we talk on Thursday, there's some concern that I have where, as you go through this process, and let's just say Chief Ferrera's replacement is announced, and that chief, in my opinion, is extremely interested in figuring out a way to address the concerns the board majority has in regards to accountability, performance, and the list goes on, everything we've been talking about for the last couple of years. I'm all ears. But as of right now, I haven't had any notification from Chief Ferreira. I mean, it's to the point where he hasn't even officially announced his retirement, okay? And it's something where I've been asking about it for over 6 months. And if they can't be straightforward about our main point person retiring and knowing who the replacement person is, clearly to me, they have no interest in being here, in my opinion.
Well, but the other issue is you deal with the willingness to cooperate, but you also look against that also at the issues of the state organization and whether they're capable of performing or of doing the things that need to be done. Because there's certain things, like we're talking about, the things about pension, employee costs, the number of furlough days, the number of days off, and all this shell game that goes on, transferring costs out to the state that should be our costs. So they reduce, there's the whole game playing that's going on that, so I mean, it's a bigger picture than just the question of an individual and whether or not they're willing, to cooperate.
Right. Here, this is my other issue, and I've just kind of started to uncover, this is how is a state coming in below what the projected, expectation is for us every year. This time they said they came in at $450,000 below the projected, billable. Well, when you go and say, okay, you didn't have fire marshals in this position for this many months that were part of the contract. Okay, there's a savings there. They didn't bill us for that. You start looking at other issues and you start to figure out, well, we've got 7 extra guys here today. We're on a holding pattern. There's a fire way outside the district in some other part of California. Oh wait, but the state of California is getting billed for that overtime for people working here in this district. Oh, is that how they're saving the money? Because what's a savings to us as a district, okay, is still coming out of our pocket somewhere else, and actually other people in the state of California. So it's frustrating for me to uncover this now, and that the knowledge of finding that out on our own and not being volunteer. It's like, hey, we came in under, and this is how we did it. It's not being explained to us, and that's frustrating for us because everybody's calling this a savings of up to 1.5 million. No, it's not a savings when you tell somebody, hey, I'm going to pay 100% your house. You come back and you get a 20% discount. Well, the discount's because you didn't do the other 20% of the house in the back. That's not a savings. That's, to me, not doing your job. So those are concerns for us, and we have to take those all into account because
I'm just trying to, without dealing with all that, I was just trying to say it's a bigger picture.
It's a huge picture. So that's what we're dealing with right now. And my feeling is, there's been a lot of threats of what's going to happen and who's got this, and I got enough sick. You know what? This is our job. We're going to continue to do our job. If something changes, we'll have to deal with it. But the threats, shouldn't change what's best for the district. And we need to look at every option. I think, regardless, if the new person comes in and they're extremely willing to work with us, that replaces Chief Ferreira, and we end up signing a new contract with CAL FIRE, this process has been super beneficial, I think, to the board and the community because we know what our costs are. We haven't done this in 5 years. We should be doing this every couple of years.
Well, City of Riverside, or the County of Riverside, which does it on a regular basis, just once again evaluated.
Well, the one thing that, I've had conversations with the team, and I'm not sure where the public sits on this matter, is I don't have a biased opinion. I'm trying to give the board what the board needs. If you want to move in this direction, that's fine. But if there are red flags and things that would create greater difficulties for you, I guarantee you that I'll be letting the board know that you shouldn't do this. So
appreciate that.
What's best for the board, I think, is what we're trying to do.
Sure. And we've looked at going and partnering with another agency in the county, for example, but right now, when you look at our long-term liabilities and et cetera, we actually are in the cap seat. Because we are better off than almost, as far as I know, than any other agency in the county.
I think you're right.
As far as long-term liability, as far as the ability
Paying your bills.
to set benefits and wages is that, So, and when you partner with somebody, you take on
Their liability.
their liabilities. And so right now, that's it sure would be easier to do it another way.
I mean, I'm all about shared services. When you look at other fire departments, you know, city fire departments and/or, you know, social districts like us, you know, it makes sense to find ways to, you know, partner up and reduce those costs. But when you have a side fund of zero, us, we pay that off, and you're looking at another agency that's got, you know, a $40 million side fund, and they don't have a plan of how to attack it. I don't see this group over at those board meetings yelling and screaming at them about how bad their financials are. When we look at our financials, and we got this from Sacramento, we were up there, I couldn't find one other agency. And we looked at not just fire, but sewer and water. We looked at, you know, cities, other special districts, other fire. We were doing great. You know, from where we are with the amount of money we have in the reserves, the amount of equipment we own already cash, right? We're not on some type of lease, or some agencies don't own their equipment, they're leasing it. And then the fact that we own our building, land, we're in great shape. You know, that's something to consider for us.
Dan, I know you said you didn't know what the public's opinion is, but I would venture to guess that most people don't want to see the plan rushing forward, spending down the $2.2 million that was just earmarked to go to transition costs before the special election.
Yes, okay, yeah, I understand that.
That's all I've
Okay.
You know, to address the 2.2 million.
Well, Thursday, we're gonna
Yeah.
see what the number is for real.
Right.
And that's not, you know, I mean, right now, that's just a number out there that's a number.
Okay.
Back to your question, Mike, no other red flags or things that I've seen. I think pretty much what I have is what was laid out in this great discussion, so
Appreciate it very much.
you're welcome. Thanks for your time. So we'll see you
All right, Thursday,
What time, 7?
6:30. Well, 6:30 is closed session,
Oh, okay.
but also there's public comments at 6:30. So 7, so you're gonna have to check on Gene on whether or not you're,
I'll come early just to make sure.
whether or not you're part of.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Coming over here, appreciate it.
Get to work.
Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.